Marriage. For better, for worse, for whatever she's texting at midnight while I pretend to sleep. My name is Evan Baker, and I'm 41 years old. I count other people's money for a living, forensic accounting, to be precise. I find where the bodies are buried in balance sheets, track down missing funds, and occasionally testify in court about financial crimes. It's methodical work that requires patience, attention to detail, and a suspicious mind. Skills that, as it turns out, are surprisingly useful in marriage. Jessica, my wife of 15 years, sits across from me at our kitchen table this Tuesday morning, scrolling through her phone with the kind of intense focus she used to reserve for our conversations. Her coffee grows cold while she types furiously, occasionally smiling at whatever response she receives. Late meeting again tonight? I ask, buttering my toast with deliberate precision. She doesn't look up. Probably. Rick wants to review the quarterly projections before the board presentation. Rick, Richard Vaughn, CEO of Meridian Industries, where Jessica works as Vice President of Marketing. In the past 6 months, Rick's name has appeared in our conversations more often than mine appears in Jessica's phone contacts, which, given that I'm her husband, strikes me as statistically improbable. You've been working late a lot lately, I observe, keeping my tone neutral. After 15 years of marriage and 20 years of investigating financial irregularities, I've learned that accusations without evidence only put people on guard. That's what happens when you want to succeed, Evan. She finally looks up, and there's an edge in her voice that wasn't there 6 months ago. Some of us have ambitions beyond counting other people's pennies. The barb hits its mark, but I don't react. Instead, I study her face the way I study suspicious ledger entries, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, things that don't add up. Her makeup is more elaborate than usual for a Tuesday. Her blouse is new, expensive looking, and unless my eyes deceive me, she's wearing perfume at 7:30 in the morning. Maya's got that science fair project due next week, I say, changing subjects. Our 12-year-old daughter inherited my analytical mind and Jessica's drive, a combination that usually results in ambitious school projects and late-night construction sessions at our dining room table. You'll have to help her. I'll be swamped all week. Jessica stands, grabbing her purse and coffee mug. She pauses at the kitchen counter, and I watch her check her reflection in the window, adjusting her hair with the kind of care that suggests she's expecting someone to notice. After she leaves, I sit in the silence of our modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Cleveland. The mortgage is in both our names, but I make the payments. The furniture is Jessica's choice, but I assemble it. The marriage is supposed to be a partnership, but lately it feels like I'm the only one showing up for work. My phone buzzes with a text from my best friend Troy. Beer tonight? Sarah's got book club. Troy Matthews has been my friend since college, back when we both thought we'd change the world. He became a union electrician, I became an accountant, and we both married women who thought they deserved better. The difference is, Sarah actually loves Troy, despite his blue-collar job and weekend fishing trips. Jessica used to love me, or at least, she used to pretend convincingly. I text back, can't. Maya's got homework and Jessica's got another late meeting. His response comes immediately. Those air quotes are loud enough to hear through text, buddy. Troy knows. He's always been perceptive about people, probably because he spends his days working with his hands instead of buried in spreadsheets. He sees things I miss, even when those things are happening in my own house. That evening, Maya and I work on her volcano project, while Jessica's chair sits empty at the dinner table. Maya inherited my methodical nature and Jessica's perfectionism, which means she wants her volcano to be both scientifically accurate and visually impressive. Why doesn't Mom help with projects anymore? Maya asks, carefully measuring baking soda with the precision of a chemist. She's busy with work, I say, which is true but incomplete. The complete truth is that Jessica seems busy with everything except us. Is she coming to the science fair? I'm sure she'll try. Another true but incomplete statement. Jessica will try to come, the same way she tries to remember our anniversary, tries to ask about my day, tries to pretend she's still invested in this family. Later that night, after Maya goes to bed, I do something I've never done before. I check Jessica's laptop. It's password protected, but Jessica has never been particularly creative with security. Her password is Maya 2011, our daughter's name and birth year. The same password she uses for everything, which I know because she used to ask me to check her email when she was traveling. Her browser history tells a story that makes my stomach clench. Restaurant reservations at places we've never been together. Google searches for how to know if you're falling out of love, and signs your marriage is over. online shopping for lingerie that I've never seen her wear. But it's the email that confirms what I've been trying not to admit to myself. The message is from Rick, sent at 11:47 p.m. last night. Can't stop thinking about this afternoon. You were incredible. Same time tomorrow? Jessica's response, sent at 12:03 a.m. I shouldn't, but I can't help myself. Yes. I close the laptop and sit in our dark living room, surrounded by 15 years of shared memories that suddenly feel like evidence of a crime I didn't know was being committed. Wedding photos on the mantle show a younger version of myself, grinning beside a woman who looked at me like I was her future. Now she looks at me like I'm an obstacle to it. The forensic accountant in me wants to gather more evidence, build an airtight case before making any accusations. But the husband in me already knows enough. My wife is having an affair with her boss, and I'm the last to know. 3 weeks later, Jessica announces that we're attending Meridian Industries' annual company party. This comes as a surprise, since she's spent the last 2 years making excuses to avoid bringing me to corporate functions. Rick specifically asked about you, she says, which should sound flattering but somehow doesn't. He wants to meet the man behind the woman, he said. I'll bet he does. The party is held at the downtown Marriott, in a ballroom that probably costs more to rent than I make in a month. Jessica spends 2 hours getting ready, emerging from our bedroom in a black dress that I've never seen before, and heels that add 4 inches to her height. She looks stunning, which makes what I know about her affair hurt even more. You look beautiful, I tell her, and mean it. She smiles, but it doesn't reach her eyes. Thank you. Try to mingle tonight, okay? Don't just stand in the corner making jokes about everyone. I'll be the picture of corporate charm, I promise, adjusting my tie. It's my best suit, purchased 5 years ago for my cousin's wedding, and it shows. Next to Jessica, I look like exactly what I am, a middle-class accountant trying to fit in at a rich person's party. The ballroom buzzes with conversation and laughter. Executives in expensive suits discuss quarterly earnings, while their wives compare vacation destinations and jewelry. I recognize several faces from the company website, including the board chairman, Eldon Marsh, a silver-haired man in his 70s who built his fortune in manufacturing. Jessica immediately begins working the room, introducing me to colleagues with the kind of enthusiasm that feels performative. This is my husband, Evan. He's a forensic accountant. Like CSI but with spreadsheets, I add, because self-deprecating humor is my default defense mechanism. Most people chuckle politely and move on. I'm the spouse, the accessory, the plus one who doesn't quite belong. It's a familiar feeling from previous corporate events, but tonight it stings more because I know why Jessica really brought me here. Then I see Rick Vaughn. He's everything I expected and worse. Tall, handsome in an artificially maintained way, with the kind of confident smile that comes from never being told no. He wears his success like cologne, expensive and overwhelming. When he spots Jessica across the room, his face lights up with an expression I recognize, because it used to be reserved for me. Evan! Rick approaches with his hand extended and a grin that doesn't match his eyes. Finally, the famous husband. Jessica talks about you all the time. All good things, I hope, I say, shaking his hand and noting his grip is slightly too firm and held slightly too long. She says you're brilliant with numbers. Me, I can barely balance my checkbook. He laughs at his own joke. Good thing I have people for that. People like Jessica, apparently. She appears at Rick's side with practiced timing, smiling at both of us, like this is a perfectly normal conversation between a husband and his wife's boss, rather than a bizarre triangle involving a husband and his wife's lover. Rick was just telling me about the new client they landed, I say to Jessica, though Rick hasn't mentioned any clients. Oh yes, Jessica says quickly. Very exciting opportunity. Rick nods enthusiastically. Jessica's been instrumental in landing that account. She's got a real talent for client relations. The way he says it makes my skin crawl, but I keep smiling. She's always been good with people, among other things, Rick adds, and Jessica blushes. I excuse myself to get a drink, partly because I need alcohol, and partly because I need to stop myself from saying something I'll regret. At the bar, I order a whiskey and try to process what just happened. Rick isn't even trying to hide his interest in my wife. If anything, he seems to enjoy flaunting it in front of me. You look like a man who needs something stronger than whiskey. I turn to find Eldon Marsh beside me, ordering what appears to be his third martini of the evening. Just taking in the atmosphere, I say. Ah, yes, the atmosphere. Eldon glances across the room where Rick has his hand on Jessica's lower back, guiding her toward a group of executives. thick enough to cut with a knife tonight. There's something in his tone that suggests he knows more than he's saying. Before I can respond, he continues. You know, I've been in business for 50 years, and I've learned that the most dangerous people are the ones who think they're untouchable. He takes a sip of his martini and fixes me with a sharp look. They make mistakes, big ones. Is that so? Oh yes. They get careless, overconfident. They forget that someone is always watching. He raises his glass in a mock toast. To careful observation, Mr. Baker. Before I can ask what he means, Eldon disappears into the crowd, leaving me with more questions than answers. I spend the next hour watching my wife and her boss from across the room. They're not exactly subtle. Jessica laughs too loudly at Rick's jokes, touches his arm when she talks, leans in closer than necessary when he speaks. Rick, for his part, treats her like a prized possession, showing her off to other executives while maintaining constant physical contact. The worst part is how good they look together. Rick's confidence complements Jessica's ambition. His success matches her aspirations. They're both beautiful, both driven, both part of a world that I'll never fully understand or belong to. Around 10 o'clock, I lose track of them entirely. 1 minute they're holding court near the stage, the next they've vanished. I check the bar, the balcony, even the lobby, but they're nowhere to be found. That's when I remember the hotel rooms upstairs. I take the elevator to the 5th floor, where Meridian has reserved a block of rooms for out-of-town guests. The hallway is empty except for room service trays and the distant sound of a television. I'm about to give up when I hear voices from around the corner. Can't keep doing this, Rick. Jessica's voice, strained and emotional. Why not? We're good together, better than good. Because I'm married, because this is complicated. Only because you're making it complicated. Leave him. I press myself against the wall, heart pounding so loud I'm sure they can hear it. It's not that simple. There's Maya, the house, everything we've built together. What have you built? A boring life in a boring suburb, with a boring husband who counts other people's money for a living? The words hit like physical blows, but I force myself to keep listening. Evan's a good man, Jessica says, but there's no conviction in her voice. Good isn't enough anymore, is it? You want more. You deserve more. I can give you more. There's a long pause, then the sound of movement, clothing rustling, a soft moan that makes my stomach turn. Room 517, Rick whispers. 10 minutes. I hear footsteps approaching and duck into an alcove near the ice machine. Jessica passes first, hair slightly mussed, lipstick gone. She doesn't see me as she hurries toward the elevator. Rick follows a minute later, straightening his tie and checking his phone. I wait until they're both gone, then walk to room 517. The door is slightly ajar, and through the gap I can see Rick's jacket draped over a chair, his phone charging on the nightstand. The room key lies on the dresser next to a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. Without thinking, I push the door open and step inside. Rick's briefcase sits open on the bed, papers scattered around it. Most are standard corporate documents, but one folder catches my attention. Meridian Consulting, confidential. I flip through the contents quickly, my trained eye picking up irregularities immediately. Shell companies, offshore accounts, payments to entities that don't seem to exist. And Jessica's signature on several transfer authorizations, approving payments that don't match any legitimate business expenses I can identify. My phone buzzes with a text from Jessica. Not feeling well. Going home. Can you catch a ride with someone? I photograph every document in the folder, then carefully return everything to its original position. As I'm about to leave, I spot something else. A hotel receipt for this room, paid for with a Meridian corporate credit card. More evidence of Rick using company resources for his personal affairs. Back in the ballroom, the party continues without me. I find Troy's wife Sarah near the dessert table and ask for a ride home. During the 20-minute drive to my house, she chatters about the party, the food, the decorations, but I barely hear her. My mind is processing what I've discovered, formulating plans, considering options. Jessica is already in bed when I get home, pretending to sleep. I sit in my home office until dawn, staring at the photos on my phone and thinking about 15 years of marriage that apparently meant less to my wife than a few months of excitement with her boss. But I'm not just a betrayed husband anymore. I'm a forensic accountant with evidence of corporate misconduct, and I'm very good at my job. The next morning, Jessica acts like nothing happened. She makes coffee, kisses my cheek goodbye, and heads off to another day of work with the same casual deception she's been practicing for months. I almost admire her ability to compartmentalize, to live two completely different lives without apparent guilt or conflict. Almost. I call in sick to work and spend the day analyzing the documents I photographed. What I find is worse than a simple affair. Rick has been using Meridian Industries as his personal piggy bank, creating fake consulting contracts and phantom vendors to funnel money into accounts he controls. The amounts aren't huge by corporate standards, 10,000 here, 15,000 there. But they add up to nearly $500,000 over 2 years. Jessica's involvement appears to be limited to approving transfers, probably without understanding their true purpose. She's guilty of negligence and poor judgment, but Rick is guilty of embezzlement and fraud. More importantly, I now have leverage. That evening, Maya and I are working on her volcano when Jessica comes home with takeout from an expensive restaurant downtown. "Thought I'd treat us tonight," she says, unpacking containers of food that cost more than our usual weekly grocery budget. "What's the occasion?" I ask. "Do I need an occasion to spoil my family?" She ruffles Maya's hair and settles into her chair at the dinner table. For a moment, she almost seems like the woman I married, attentive, affectionate, present. And then her phone buzzes with a text, and the mask slips back into place. "Sorry, work emergency," she says, stepping into the kitchen to respond. I follow her, ostensibly to get napkins from the drawer, but really to observe. She's texting with the focus and intensity of a teenager in love, smiling at her phone in a way she hasn't smiled at me in months. "Everything okay?" I ask. "Fine. Just Rick being Rick." She puts the phone away quickly. "You know how demanding he can be." Oh, I'm beginning to understand exactly how demanding Rick can be. After dinner, I help Maya with her homework while Jessica retreats to the living room with her laptop. She's supposedly working, but I can hear the soft ping of instant messages and her occasional quiet laughter. It's like living with a ghost of my wife while she conducts her real life somewhere else. Once Maya is in bed, I make my first move. "I met some interesting people at the party last night," I say, settling into the chair across from Jessica. She looks up from her laptop. "Oh, like who?" "Eldon Marsh, for one. The board chairman. Fascinating man." "Eldon's lovely," Jessica says, but there's a slight tension in her voice now. "Very old school. He mentioned something interesting about corporate oversight, how the board is implementing new financial controls. This is a complete fabrication, but Jessica doesn't know that. Random audits, that sort of thing." Jessica's fingers pause over her keyboard. Random audits. Apparently they're concerned about expense account abuse, unauthorized expenditures. He seemed very serious about it. I lean back in my chair, keeping my tone conversational. "Said they're bringing in outside forensic accountants to review everything." "That seems excessive," Jessica says carefully. "Does it? I mean, when you're dealing with other people's money, you want to make sure everything's above board. Trust but verify, as they say." Jessica closes her laptop with more force than necessary. "I'm tired. I think I'll go to bed early." She's scared, which means she knows more about Rick's activities than I initially thought. Good. Fear makes people careless, and careless people make mistakes. The next day, I take a different approach. Instead of confronting Jessica directly, I decide to gather more intelligence. I drive to Meridian Industries during lunch and park across the street, watching the building like a private investigator in a bad movie. At 12:30, Rick emerges from the main entrance, but he's not alone. Jessica walks beside him, and they're not heading toward any of the nearby restaurants. Instead, they get into Rick's black BMW and drive toward the residential part of downtown. I follow at a distance, feeling ridiculous, but unable to stop myself. They park outside a luxury apartment complex that I recognize from the real estate section of the Sunday paper. Units start at $4,000 a month, which is more than Rick should be able to afford on his salary, even as CEO of a mid-sized company. They disappear into the building for exactly 90 minutes. When they emerge, Jessica looks disheveled, and Rick looks smug. They drive back to Meridian in silence, Jessica staring out the window, while Rick drums his fingers on the steering wheel. That evening, I'm waiting in our kitchen when Jessica gets home. "Good day at work?" I ask. "The usual." She avoids eye contact, busying herself with sorting through mail that doesn't need sorting. "Have lunch anywhere interesting?" Now she looks at me, and there's something new in her expression. Not guilt, exactly, but wariness. "Just grabbed a sandwich at my desk." "Why?" "No reason. Just making conversation." But Jessica knows I don't make idle conversation about her lunch habits. She's beginning to realize that I know something, even if she's not sure what or how much. Over the next week, I develop a routine. I document Jessica's lies. track her movements when possible, and continue analyzing the financial documents from Rick's briefcase. I also do something else. I start building relationships. I call Eldon Marsh's office and request a meeting, claiming to have information about potential financial irregularities at Meridian. His assistant schedules me for the following Friday. I reach out to Marcus Webb, head of security at Meridian, whom I met briefly at the company party. I suggest coffee, mentioning that I might have some concerns about corporate security that could benefit from his expertise. Most importantly, I contact Janet Rodriguez, Meridian's head of human resources. I frame it as a social call, thanking her for the lovely party. But I plant seeds about my concerns regarding employee conduct and company policies. I'm building a network, creating allies, positioning myself strategically for what comes next. Jessica thinks she holds all the cards because she has Rick's protection and influence. But influence is meaningless when you're caught stealing from your own company. Friday afternoon, I sit in Eldon Marsh's corner office, looking out over downtown Cleveland, while he reviews the documents I've provided. "This is quite damning," he says finally. "How did you obtain these?" Rick left his briefcase unattended at the party. "I was looking for aspirin. I had a headache, and I accidentally saw some of the papers. As a forensic accountant, certain patterns jumped out at me. It's not entirely true, but it's not entirely false either. The important thing is that the evidence is real, regardless of how I obtained it. And your wife's involvement? I believe she was manipulated. Jessica's ambitious, but not dishonest. Rick probably convinced her these were legitimate transfers, maybe even romantic gestures, using company resources to impress her." Eldon nods slowly. "You're very generous, considering the circumstances. I want what's best for Meridian Industries," I say. "And what's best is getting rid of people who abuse their positions. What do you propose? Give me 2 weeks. Let me gather more evidence, build an airtight case. Then we expose everything at once, publicly, dramatically, in a way that sends a clear message about corporate accountability." Eldon smiles, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I feel like I'm not fighting alone. "Mr. Baker," he says, "I think we're going to work very well together." The next 2 weeks pass in a blur of careful planning and meticulous preparation. I maintain the facade of normal married life while secretly building my case against Rick and, by extension, against Jessica. It's exhausting work, pretending everything is fine while documenting evidence of my wife's betrayal and her boss's crimes. Jessica, meanwhile, grows increasingly careless. Her lies become more elaborate and less believable. She claims to be working late on nights when I drive by Meridian and see the building dark except for security lights. She says she's attending client dinners at restaurants that don't take reservations, meeting with vendors who don't exist, reviewing contracts that were signed months ago. The worst part is watching her transform into someone I don't recognize. The woman I married was many things: ambitious, sometimes selfish, occasionally thoughtless, but she wasn't a liar. This new version of Jessica lies as easily as breathing, creating fictional narratives to explain her absences and mood changes. "I might be late again tonight," she announces over breakfast on a Tuesday morning. "Rick wants to review the Henderson proposal before tomorrow's presentation. I've already confirmed that the Henderson proposal was approved and filed last week. There is no presentation tomorrow." "Which Henderson proposal?" I ask casually. Jessica pauses, coffee cup halfway to her lips. "The marketing initiative for their new product line. Henderson Industries manufactures industrial lubricants. They don't have product lines, and they don't need marketing initiatives." Jessica knows this, which means she's not even trying to create believable lies anymore. "Sounds important," I say. "Very." She finishes her coffee quickly and grabs her purse. "Don't wait up." After she leaves, I check her laptop again. She's changed her password, but Jessica has never been good with technology. Her new password is Rick 2023, which tells me everything I need to know about her current state of mind. Her browser history reveals hotel reservations, restaurant bookings, and online purchases that paint a clear picture of an ongoing affair. But it's her email that provides the most damaging evidence. Rick has been promising Jessica a promotion to senior vice president, complete with a substantial salary increase, and her own office. He's also been discussing their future together, painting elaborate pictures of the life they could have once she resolves her current situation. The current situation, apparently, is me. More troubling are the financial documents Jessica has been reviewing. Rick has been showing her bank statements for offshore accounts, investment portfolios, and real estate holdings that far exceed what his legitimate income could support. He's not just stealing from Meridian, he's flaunting his theft to impress my wife. That evening, I make a decision that goes against every instinct I have as both a husband and a professional. I decide to confront Rick directly. I know he'll be at Murphy's Tavern downtown because Jessica mentioned it in passing, another client meeting that doesn't exist. Murphy's is the kind of upscale bar where corporate executives go to feel sophisticated while drinking overpriced whiskey and discussing deals that will never happen. I arrive at 8:30 and find Rick holding court at a corner table, surrounded by junior executives and administrative assistants who laugh too loudly at his jokes and nod too enthusiastically at his opinions. Jessica sits beside him, playing the role of devoted colleague while Rick's hand rests possessively on her thigh. I order a beer at the bar and watch them for 20 minutes, studying their dynamic like a forensic accountant studying suspicious transactions. Rick is performing for his audience, telling stories about his business acumen and corporate victories. Jessica hangs on every word, occasionally adding details that make Rick's accomplishments sound even more impressive. They're both drunk on power and attention, which makes them careless. Rick's voice carries across the bar as he describes a recent consulting contract that I know is fictional. Jessica giggles when he mentions a business trip to Miami that was actually a romantic weekend funded by Meridian's expense account. When Rick gets up to use the restroom, I make my move. "Evening, Jessica." She turns, and her face goes through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, anger, and finally defiance. "Evan, what are you doing here?" "Having a drink. You?" "Client meeting. I told you about it this morning." "Right, the Henderson proposal." I take the empty chair across from her, noting how the other people at the table suddenly find their drinks fascinating. "How's that going?" "Fine. Good. We're making progress." "I'm sure you are." I take a sip of my beer and look around the table. "Lots of Henderson people here tonight?" Jessica's jaw tightens. "It's a preliminary discussion, very informal." "Ah." I nod as if this makes perfect sense. "Well, don't let me interrupt. I know how important your work is." Rick returns from the restroom and stops short when he sees me. For a moment, his confident facade slips, and I see something that might be fear or anger or both. "Evan, what a surprise!" He recovers quickly, extending his hand with that same too-firm grip. "Join us for a drink?" "Thanks, but I can't stay long. Just wanted to say hello to my wife." The word wife hangs in the air like a challenge. Rick's smile becomes strained, and Jessica looks like she wants to disappear under the table. "Of course, family first, right?" Rick sits down and immediately puts his arm around Jessica's shoulders, a gesture that's clearly territorial. "Jessica was just telling us about your daughter's science project. A volcano, wasn't it?" "Maya's very thorough in her research," I say. "She likes to understand how things work, why they explode when they do. Takes after her father that way." Rick's grip on Jessica's shoulder tightens almost imperceptibly. "Research is important, though sometimes you can get so caught up in details that you miss the bigger picture." "True, but in my experience, the details are usually where you find the most interesting information. The patterns that don't make sense, the numbers that don't add up, the stories that change depending on who's telling them." We're not talking about Maya's volcano anymore, and everyone at the table knows it. The junior executives look uncomfortable. The administrative assistants study their phones, and Jessica stares at her wine glass like it holds the answers to all of life's problems. "Well," Rick says finally, "I'm sure you're very good at your job." "I am. In fact, I've been working on a particularly interesting case lately. Corporate fraud, embezzlement, abuse of power, the kind of thing that makes headlines when it all comes out." Rick's face hardens. "Sounds complicated." "Not really. Follow the money, document the lies, build the case one piece at a time. It's actually quite straightforward once you know what to look for." I finish my beer and stand up. "Well, I should get home. Maya's waiting for help with her homework." I lean down and kiss Jessica's cheek, noting how she flinches away from my touch. "Don't be too late, honey. You know how I worry." As I walk away, I can feel Rick's eyes burning into my back. Good. Let him worry about what I know and what I plan to do with that knowledge. Fear makes people desperate, and desperate people make fatal mistakes. The next morning, Jessica confronts me over breakfast. "What was that about last night?" "What was what about?" "Don't play dumb, Evan." "That whole performance at Murphy's. I stopped by for a drink and saw you there. I thought it would be rude not to say hello. You were making threats." Was I? I thought I was just making conversation about work. Jessica slams her coffee mug down hard enough to slosh liquid onto the table. I know what you're doing. What am I doing, Jessica? You're trying to sabotage my career because you're jealous of my success. Your success. I repeat the words slowly, tasting their irony. Is that what we're calling it? I've worked hard to get where I am. I'm not going to let your insecurities destroy everything I've built. What have you built exactly? Besides a tissue of lies and a relationship with a man who's stealing from his own company. The accusation hangs between us like a loaded weapon. Jessica's face goes pale, then red, then pale again. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Rick's been embezzling money from Meridian for 2 years, creating fake consulting contracts, phantom vendors, unauthorized expense accounts. And you've been helping him, probably without realizing it at first, but definitely knowing it now. That's ridiculous, is it? Room 517 at the Marriott, paid for with company funds. Dinners at restaurants that cost more than most people make in a week, all charged to Meridian's corporate account. Weekend trips to Miami, Chicago, New York, all supposedly business travel for a company that does 90% of its business within 100 miles of Cleveland. Jessica's hands are shaking now. You're wrong. I have documentation, Jessica. Receipts, bank records, transfer authorizations with your signature. I know about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the fake consulting fees. I know everything. She stares at me for a long moment, and I watch 15 years of marriage collapse in her eyes. What do you want? She asks finally. I want my wife back. But since that's apparently impossible, I'll settle for justice. Justice? Rick is going to pay for what he's done. To Meridian, to the employees whose pension fund he's been raiding, to the shareholders whose trust he's violated, and to me. Jessica stands up abruptly, knocking her chair backward. You're going to destroy everything. No, Jessica, you already did that. I'm just going to make sure everyone knows about it. She leaves without another word, and I sit alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the debris of our marriage and the satisfaction of finally telling the truth. No. 2 weeks later, Meridian Industries holds its annual shareholders gala at the Cleveland Museum of Art. It's a black tie affair, attended by investors, board members, local politicians, and business leaders from across Ohio. The kind of event where reputations are made and destroyed. Deals are struck and careers are launched, or ended. Jessica spends the entire day preparing, transforming herself into the kind of woman who belongs at such events. Her dress costs more than our monthly mortgage payment, her jewelry is borrowed from her sister, and her hair and makeup are done by professionals. She looks stunning, sophisticated, successful, everything she's always wanted to be. Yeah, it's almost a shame that tonight will be